As we continue to look beyond ourselves, we begin to see the many ways that we can answer God's call to serve. 1 John 3:18 tells us, "Little children, let us love not in word or speech, but in truth and action." The very same things that prevented us from seeing where we are called to serve often become the excuses that prevent us from actually serving. Being a part of God's community, the church, can help us eliminate those excuses as we work together to respond to God. As we love in truth and action, we serve God by doing God's will on earth just as it is in heaven.
Good morning. Happy day. No? Yes. Thank you. I'm going to wait here for a while. We got all the time we need, people. It's good to see everybody here. Hey, real quick, we had a little reunion take place among us. We've got two little boys right here, Sam and Andy, who grew up in this church, and they're not little boys anymore. And little Mikey, my little Mikey, all grown up over there with all these kids and wife and everything. So that means one thing. Y'all are getting old. Right? Nope, not me. Anyway, it's really good to see them kind of thinking back on those old days of when life was good. You remember those days, right? Oh, well. It's all good. Hey, we're continuing our sermon series that we are people that have been chosen to serve by our God, and that's something we need to be reminded about. And we're going to talk a lot through this whole summer about this because here's the fact about life right here. Since the day you were born, God has been calling you by your name. God has been calling you by your name. God has been inviting you to be a part of God's family from the very day you were born. That's just the way it is. But when you make that decision to be a part of God's family, man, that's when everything changes. That's when everything gets really different. Everything changes the minute we accept that invitation, because just like any other family, including your own family, there are certain expectations that are placed upon you that are non-negotiable. Anybody have non-negotiables within your family? Anybody? Yeah, if you don't, it's chaos, isn't it? If you don't, the word they call for that is dysfunctional. Right? Now, if you want dysfunctional, come to my house when I grew up. Even when we get together for family gatherings, we put the fun in dysfunctional, okay? You don't want to live that way. We certainly don't want a church that way. But tendencies are that churches are that way, which is why nobody's going to church anymore, except those who continue to be a part of the church for the last several generations. So there are certain expectations that are placed upon us that are non-negotiable. And it is up to us as a people of God to make those changes within our own lives in order for us to be a part of God's family. We have to go through the process of knowing what those expectations are, don't we? We're going to have to learn. We're going to have to grow. We have to do things differently so we can learn, so that we can begin to fit ourselves into God's kingdom instead of taking the easy route and trying to change God to fit into our kingdom. We hear that all the time in Christianity. We see it all the time. I have certain things about people I don't like, so therefore I'll make God hate them too. Right? We see that too many times. That has to change. We have to change. I have to change the things that I value. I have to change the things about my priorities. I have to change my priorities to live in this world. I have to make other changes. I have to change the way that I even behave so that I can fit into this kingdom that God wants me to live. You know, we brought in so many kids in the course of our time here. That's not a secret. And that's hard. to bring in kids with no life, basically. And we've also asked a lot of kids to leave because they chose to live the way that they were in a disruptive way in this house. And I can tell you all sorts of war stories about that. The hardest one was having to take a young man to his officer and turn him in for drug use and watching him go to TYC. Having to go and be gone and haven't seen him since. Those are the hard things that we have to do. But even in our own homes, there are certain rules and certain expectations that we place on each other in order for us to live a life abundant. It's no different in the life of the church. We have to go through some changing. No matter how functional we think we are, we have to make changes in order to fit into God's kingdom. And so we have to learn, we have to grow, we have to understand what those changes are for us to be able to fit in and to do the things that God is asking us to do. And that learning and growing process doesn't stop at any certain age. It'll continue till the very day that you die. You got that? Because the bottom line is this. God has chosen you to play a very important role in the kingdom of God. God has chosen you to play an important role. What is that role? Does everybody know what that is? If not, that's why we're here. God has limited certain spiritual gifts to you. You are very limited in the things that you are capable of doing. But if you combine your limited spiritual gifts with others and work with them side by side, then together we can reflect God's love and mercy to the world. But we also have this ability to draw people closer to this God that we love. And the third thing is that you have been chosen by God to this life under this form of service. We're going to be talking about this all summer. We're talking about it all summer because for us, we all have to discover our place within God's kingdom. We have to find the place that God is using you in your specific gifts in order to make life great for others. But in order for us to be able to achieve that or to get there, we have to be able to do three things. You ready for this? 3 non-negotiables. What's the first thing you have to do? We talked about it last month. We're going to have to do these things. We have to see beyond ourselves. Is that hard or easy? Thank you. It's hard for one person. The rest of y'all, it's easy. I appreciate that. Okay? We talk a little bit about how consumed we get with our lives, right? It's no secret. We're consumed with work. That probably drags us more than anything else. What time we have left, then we're consumed with what? With family. And then we get consumed with other extracurricular things that kind of help us break the tension of both work and both family or doing things together. And so we're consumed with our personal time that begins to the point where we can't see beyond this circle that we draw around our lives. And that just kind of makes us blind to the other things that are taking place outside of our circle. It makes us blind to the needs of other people. For example, we started Freedom House 20 plus years ago. We were told 1,000,000 times, I bet, that it will never, ever work because Parker County does not have a problem with domestic violence. Now, if I have my little circle and I can't see beyond those walls, I'm going to look at my wall and say, I don't have a problem with this, so there is no problem that exists at all. But if we look beyond ourselves, if we see beyond our walls, and we can see that there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of families in Parker County that do struggle with abuse every single day. Talk to any officer, sheriff, or police. They'll tell you the same. When we started a ministry for street kids called Crossroads, there were people that told us 1,000,000 times it was a waste of our time because we don't have homeless teen problem. If you can't see beyond our walls, you look just within yourself and says, nope, everybody under my care has a home. There's no problem. I don't see anything. But if you're able to see beyond those walls that we build around our little circle, then we're going to understand that, you know what? The year that we got started, there were over 225 reported homeless teens in Weatherford, not the county, Weatherford itself. Think about that. Think about that just for a minute. When we create a wall around our own personal lives, we are blinded to the pain of the forgotten. We cannot hear the cries of the abused. We do not think, or we don't want to think, that there's anything wrong. Let me tell you about people of God. The people of God are expected to be trained to see beyond ourselves, to see beyond our walls, and to identify the needs of the people. And to reach out to those who continue to struggle with this life. That is how people of God think and see. That is how we are to train to be seen. That is a non-negotiable. We have to see beyond ourselves. But that's just the first step. What's the second step? We have to learn how to eliminate excuses for not doing the very things that God needs us to do. Excuses generally come when we're too involved with our own personal world of family and work and even leisure that God's plans just get put off, or they get taken on to somebody else. We get those hired people to take care of all that business for us. And so it becomes very easy for us to say no to God. But when we discover God's passion for our lives, understand who God is, that is when we find fulfillment. And if we keep saying no to God, we will never discover a life that God is calling us to lead that leads us to a life of fulfillment and understanding. You'll never find that unique place that God is calling you to help those who are in need. To find those folks out there that are in need of help and to learn how to say yes to God. But that's only the second step. The third step is to discover what you're passionate about. What is your passion? To me, the secret to living a life of Christ is really no secret at all. It's just as simple as learning to listen to the voice of God and to respond by gathering a team of people who are led by that same voice and make things happen. We see this model played out before us all the time, don't we? Does anybody believe in business? Don't we do that? Let's just take something like education. Let's take that for an example. Do you want to educate children? What do? Well, you find people who have the same passion for children, right? And then you pull those people together and you put them in the right position according to their limited gifts. And then you just make it happen. Right? It's as simple as that. However, schools and churches fulfill two completely different roles. Schools ask the question, what do you want to be when you grow up? Churches ask the question, where is God going to use you as you get older for the rest of your life to make things happen for this world? In order for us to fulfill our role as God people, we need to do all three of those things. So we're going to quickly talk about number 2, all right? Eliminate excuses. Anybody have any excuses today? I've got a million of them. All right. In 2009, a woman walked into my office. And she had that look of almost panic in her eyes. And she looked at me and said, God is calling us to go to Ecuador. Okay? Very sincere, very deliberate, very involved in the life of the church. And she came into my office and says, we need to go to Ecuador. Okay? What would be your first response? See ya. All right? All sorts of excuses come up, right? All sorts of reasons not to. Where is it? And who took the Q out of the word Ecuador, right? Okay, those are the first two that came to my mind. The second thing was, I don't have time for that. You kidding me? I have 400 people to make happy or they're going to be mad at me. That's my job, right? Dance for people, right? Also, it's expensive. It's a third world country. It's dirty. It's stinky. All right? I've heard hundreds of excuses not to go to Ecuador. Still hear hundreds of excuses not to go to Ecuador. We can't afford it. We got our own problems here in the United States. We got this, we got that. You can make a list of things, but there's only one reason to do it. What was that one reason to do it? Anybody? Okay, God said something. And it's not like somebody had a bad dream and said something. But sincerity of a person who is literally entrenched in the life of the church comes to you with a panicked look on their face and says, God is saying to me to do this. What do? What do we do? People of God? We do it. We figure out what in the world is God doing with this young lady. You don't think about it. You do it. Because the more we think about it, the more we think ourselves out of it, right? That's a crazy thing to do, going to Ecuador. That was in 2009. We've been working with these people every year, sometimes 2, 3, 4 times a year since that time, 8 years. That's a long time. And now we work with another organization that helps us out. And I'm going to be honest with you, we had some issues with that group. And who wouldn't, right? After all, they're a third world country, right? They've been neglected for 500 years. So what do you expect to find? But the biggest problem we had is that these people didn't understand what the word community meant, especially Christian community. They didn't help each other out. In fact, they worked against each other. So you have 900 people working against each other, trying to survive. How does that work for you? Anybody have a family of 4 that works against each other? How does that work in your home? Try putting 900 in that house and see how that works for you. And to be honest with you, this was going to be our last trip, honestly, because they were not getting what we're trying to do, and we thought we were wasting our time, and just let them alone and move on. For every 4 of us we would go, there's always one person that would show up to help us work. You know how frustrating that is? Here come those gringos. They're doing our work for us. Kind of sounds like North America. But that's another story. So what did we do? We went up there with 3 people in mind to help at their homes. And these are a list of those. This is what those 3 people look like. There are 3 families that were selected. That's one of the ladies. She has a family too. These are 3 families that we helped. Keep rolling through there just so all 3 show up. All right? Now, we just go out and say, hey, you're selected. We're going to help you. They had to have a tremendous need. The guy on the right is not a part of them. He's a monster that worked with us. He was the heavy. And you got one more family. One more family. There you go. There you go. And that's one of the houses we built. So they were selected because there was a tremendous need. They had big needs, but they had to have a tremendous need. They also had the ability to say, we're going to work and do some sweat equity. We're also going to help other people in the community. And we're also going to be a part of this process of doing that. And so when we keep doing it, they're going to work with us even more. And so they were tremendous. And as a result of that, there were a lot of people that showed up when we got there. And so for every one of us, there was 4 people that were helping. It was amazing to see the change that took place. And I'm not going to say it was overnight. It was 8 years it took. But we're on the last leg saying, I don't know if we need to do this again. So I'll show you a quick video of the things that took place here.
Hey, work it, Tabat. A photo. Cheese with... No, you try. Cheese.
Did a lot of work, people. That was hard. I don't want to look at any more cement the rest of my life. We did that for 2 solid days. It's nothing but making cement. And if people say, how much is concrete worth to you? And I said, I'll pay you whatever you want for it. Anything. I'll give you my children just so I don't have to do that. It was the most fulfilling trip of all for a lot of reasons. We had 14 great workers that were there that committed along with the sides of all the people in Purseer. And then another needy community came in to help us on that day. And so everything was just like the perfect storm of taking place right there. And that's what kind of made it all fulfilling, because we worked very hard. And I can remember being there for 8 years, and we stayed one time when it got dark. In the 4 days that we worked there, there were 3 nights that we left when we couldn't see anymore, because we were just so into the whole process. It was hard work, but it was fulfilling work, and that was a neat thing. And all this started because we said yes instead of no. You see how that works? You know, if we just say no, that's just costs too much, it does this too much. You look at those 3 families on there, and every time we saw a little ribbon cutting for their homes. And every time that they would say something, they would just break out in tears. They couldn't finish the things that they were saying. And that's when you look around and you say, this is why we do what we do. Because as a family of God, they are our family. Whether we think it that way or not, that is a non-negotiable as well. Those are our brothers and sisters, just like you are. So are they. And they have been touched by the hand of God through the work of 14 people and beyond, because a lot of the funds were raised for that through y'all's efforts. And so that is something that was very encouraging for us. Now, I want to say this too. You know, remember the Apostle Peter? You know, after Jesus died, he began to expand his ministry. He's really trying to get into the hearts and minds of people to talk about how important this Christ is to us, how important it is. And if we would just stop what we're doing and take that next step and invest into this ministry of Jesus Christ and do the very things that's asked of us and put aside all the reasons not to and just do the reasons can, you're going to find something that you never imagined that you would find before again. And I like the way he put it in this text. He said this, the end of all things is near. I love that statement. The end of all things is near. What's he talking about? The end of times, right? How accurate was he? Very accurate, because it's not our time, is it? How many of you work well with deadlines? Anybody? What if I decide, you know what, today is Sunday, I'll just wait till next week sometime to finish my sermon. Besides an amen from Danny Bruce, what else would y'all get? Huh? Whether it's today or tomorrow, whether it's your own personal life or the world, it doesn't matter. We are in the end times. There's a deadline. We're not going to live forever. That's another mini-series on vampire. That's not this. Having a deadline for us makes it, hey, there is a time that we need to get up and we need to go and get things done today. We can't put off tomorrow what we need to get done today. There's a sense that we need to do the very things that we do. So the end of all things is near is how he starts. Therefore, be very serious and be very disciplined yourself for the sake of your prayers. And then he makes a list of non-negotiables for the church. This is what you need to be doing. You need to maintain constant love for one another, because love covers a multitude of sins. Always learn to love. Be hospitable to one another without complaining. Try that one. If you're complaining, then you're not getting it. People that complain just don't get it. Learn to get it and you won't complain. Okay? Be good stewards of the manifold grace of God. Serve one another with whatever gift each of you has received. Serve it. God has given you something very special. Find it, use it. Find no other reason but to use the very things that God has given you to serve other people. And whoever serves must do so with the strength that God supplies. Now, I keep thinking about this trip, how worn out we were. We're going to close that door at 3 o'clock on our last day. And so we get there, we're going to gather around, have a little circle, as we always do, and have communion service in the courtyard. And we're looking for 2 people. And they said, well, they're up the house, still putting in doors and windows. Oh. So we dropped everything and we went up to there, and each of us started finishing up the doors and the windows of that house. And then what happened? Then the more community came out, and then the ribbon cutting took place, and then they had this big celebration for us. And so they marched us down the street, so we're on our way to the bridge, and they go inside this building, and I see a guy, and this is PG-13, who is carrying a case of what they call cerveza, right? And they put us in this room in little plastic cups, and out comes a cerveza. Here comes our group, and they're giving this celebration for us. And then these teenagers come in with a boombox, so guess what's next? All right? So we have cerveza, we have a dancing session, and everyone's ready to go home because they don't feel comfortable, mainly because the cerveza was warm, right? But we did this because this was their gratitude for what we have done. It was their culture, and when you're in Rome or Ecuador, do as the Ecuadorians do. And so we did, and we celebrated, and then we went home. Now, if we went with our plan, we'd have missed all that. But it wasn't about us, was it? If we're able to see beyond ourselves, we can see the needs of the people in the community. It was a wonderful experience. In order for us to truly, truly benefit fully from being in God's presence, we have to stop finding reasons. We need to stop finding excuses to avoid the very things that God is asking us to do. Amen.